Hello, in today's video we're taking a look at BBC Television Centre, the former headquarters of BBC Television between 1960 and 2013. Now we'll take a look at what it's become today in a little while, but just a brief mention of the basic history of the studios and how they came to be. Now, the studios were purpose-built and they were almost 10 years in the making, from the design, planning to the actual building, which took approximately 5 years before the studios were considered finished enough to actually open in 1960. Although they weren't actually finished at that point, there were still further add-ons and other parts of the building that were still under construction even at this stage. So these studios were purpose-built to perform two main functions: to be the main headquarters of BBC Television and to be the main base where the majority of live and recorded programmes were made. This was to replace Lime Grove just up the road in Shepherd's Bush, which had been an interim building. So the studios were very successful for many years, and they carried on producing the vast majority of BBC Television's output. But all this changed in the early 90s for various managerial, financial and political reasons, I guess, and eventually this led to the closure of the studios in 2013 and reopened in 2017, and they are now a smaller studio complex which is still partially used by the BBC as well as ITV. It's also a large number of apartments where a lot of the main offices were converted into the apartments, and further blocks of apartments have been built at the rear of Television Centre. There's also some restaurants and some other bits and pieces there which are open to the public. And the picture you're seeing here is around the time that the studios closed, so the frontage that you'll see later is somewhat different, with the entrance being more open and it's actually much more greener than it is in this picture. Now, the image you're seeing here was actually taken shortly after the studios opened, when the majority of the facilities were there, but not everything, and there were still further buildings added later. And these buildings carried on being added way into the 1990s, when further offices were built, as well as further studio facilities and general production facilities were added in stages. So you can see why the building was referred to as the concrete donut by many of its staff, just by the general shape of it. So in the middle you've got a large circular courtyard with a fountain, which we'll see a bit more of in the main part of the video in a moment. But in front you've got this square block in front of the main circular part of the building. That was one of the main studios, and was, when built, the largest television studios in Europe. And you've also got all the various other studios varying in sizes. There are around 8 studios, ranging from this large one through to some very small studios, which were all gradually brought into use from 1960 onwards. So the main purpose here was that everything for the TV studios was on one level and could be accessed easily and quickly. So you had scenery docks next to all of the studios. You also had prop stores close by. You also had the videotape recording facilities were also nearby, or they didn't need to be right in the heart of the studios. The actual broadcasting areas were very close by, so programmes could be put on air quite quickly. So this was all very successful for the format of television that was being made from the 1960s right through to the early 90s, which was mostly multi-camera, live and recorded broadcasts. However, in the early 90s, due to various financial wranglings and the way that the BBC was managed, this all started to dwindle quite rapidly, and you ended up with a situation where the studios became too expensive for production teams to use, which does seem quite ridiculous as it was all purpose built. And you also had the farming out of lots of comedy and drama series to third-party production companies who would make a lot of the shows in their own studios or on location. So the studios gradually got quieter and quieter through the 90s, to the point where by the early to mid-2000s very little was actually made or broadcast from the main studio complexes. So this led to finally the actual decision to close was made, and in 2013 the studios were taken out of use and sold off, and in 2017 they reopened. So what you see today here is the frontage as it is now in 2024. So it is a bit greener. You've got these large paved areas right outside Television Centre, which used to be primarily a car park. It's also much more publicly accessible now, as it is more of a public building. So you've still got 3 of the TV studios, the main one being TV Centre 1, which is behind the wall that you can see directly in front of us. That is still quite a large studio. And then you've got the offices above, which have all been refurbished completely and converted into apartments. Now, one part of the studios that you could never publicly access unless you were there by invitation or there working for the BBC is the infamous courtyard with the Helios statue. And as you approach it, it has all been completely refurbished, and it does all look very grand and very clean. And there, as you look up, you can see the gold Helios statue standing on its plinth, which, according to rumour and stories perpetuated by a certain actor, Brian Blessed, he's alleged to have climbed up in his younger days up that pole. So this is the main courtyard here, and the fountain that sat underneath, and well, still does sit under the Helios statue. Now this fountain caused quite a bit of a problem back in the day when it was in use, when the water was on, because the videotape engineering department was in the basement directly underneath, and on more than one occasion the water cascaded through from the fountain and flooded the studios and the offices below. So it did cause a few problems. I think for a long time the fountain was turned off because it was just too dangerous to actually allow it to be on and run the risk of flooding and electrocution of the staff below. But today it is a very nice garden. And this is one of the main entrances to the former reception area, where guests would have come in, either production staff or guest artists would be coming in to be signed in to go to their dressing rooms or their production offices or production areas to make the programmes that used to be made here. At the moment, as I say, there are some daily television programmes here. I think ITV uses it for Good Morning Britain. There's also This Morning, which again is another ITV programme, and the BBC does still use it to produce a small amount of content from there. But to say it's a shadow of its former self is a bit of an understatement. The purpose it was made for is very much secondary these days, and it's quite sad that it ended up not being fully used after many years of producing very high quality television programmes. Unfortunately these days the BBC is very much a divisive organisation, both politically and financially, and there's been all the various scandals that have happened in the last 15 years or so, and they continue to this day. So it's really quite sad that the studios aren't used for what they were intended for anymore, apart from on a very small scale. But at least they still stand and it weren't completely demolished, because it is a unique part of our culture in this country. These studios are testament to a time when high quality television was being made, and I think in terms of broadcast television its days are numbered, the BBC, so I do wonder how long they'll continue in their current form. But time will tell. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and look forward to seeing you for the next video.